Well, good morning and welcome everyone. And a good morning it is indeed. My name is Oliver Blue, and I am delighted to be here with you this morning as we go through lesson 13 in the workbook for students in the Course in Miracles. And I'm excited about um, the idea for today because um, it introduces for the first time the terminology ego. And it is a term that the Course uses to describe that which is not real, not true, and totally, uh, in its idea, is totally opposed to the truth and totally opposed to the creator of the truth, which we call God. So before we get into the lesson, because it's going to be very important that we understand the course's definition or description of the ego. I mean, um, we all have our own understanding of that as we speak, but we want to make sure that we are in this process of renewing our mind, uh, that we get the full benefit of the lessons. And I think to do that, we can go ahead and kind of give the course's definition of what an ego is. And if you have your Course in Miracle book, it's on page 467. It's on page 467 in the workbook section of the course, and it's titled "What is the Ego?" And it says the ego is idolatry. I mean, just right off the bat, it just hits him in the face. Bam! Ego is idolatry. It's idol. The ego is idolatry, the sign of limited and separated self. So it's going to go on to describe the human process of birth and death, and it denotes it as the separated self. We're in these separated bodies with a separated identity, with a separate. It appears that we're here separate in separated bodies, with separated identities, and that gives the image that we are separate and apart from everything, even our creator. But in reality, we all share the same being. It's only one being, and we all share that. But this human experience gives the idea that we are separated selves, separated from each other, separated from creation, separated from the creator, and everything about this world that we see and think is designed to further feed into separation. But we're going to find out that that is the birth of the ego, because it contradicts that which is true, that which is unalterable, um, the changeless. Um, it contradicts, oneness, and so it says again, the ego is the idolatry, the sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. And that's kind of a description of what happens to a physical body. It is the will that sees the will of God as an enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. The ego is the proof that strength is weak and love is fearful. Notice now, strength is weak and love is fearful. That is the message of the ego. Life is really death. You're born to die. That's an ego idea. It's not a God idea. And then it goes on to say, and what opposes God alone is true. So this idea of separation is basically what birthed the ego. That a separation occurred, that man was separated from his creator, and um, and in that separation, uh, man took on a totally different way of thinking and being and seeing as a result of the idea of separation, and thus the ego was born. But in reality, there's never been a separation. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible for anyone or anything to be separate from its source. And God is the source of all that is real, all that is created. So when we don't embrace that oneness, when we don't embrace that reality, that separation cannot occur, then what happens is we birth and buy into the idea of an ego. And according to the course here, we're right in the middle of participating in idolatry. But relax, we're not calling you us an idolater. This is all about reversing the way we think, okay? There's no judgment here. It says that the ego is insane. If you read the text in A Course in Miracles, it says that the ego always speak first and always speak loudest. You know, we all experience that. We all experience that when something takes place in our life, immediately, generally the first thoughts to come to mind are fearful thoughts, and they are speaking loud and engendering fear, and that's an indication that it's not the voice of God, but it's the voice of the ego. It's the voice of separation, which engenders fear. The ego is insane. So he's insane. It's insane. And when I say it, he, she, in reality, the ego is an illusion. It doesn't really exist, but for the purpose of identification of where the cause of the fear in our life, we call it an ego. Okay. In fear, it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all, in separation from the infinite. In its insanity, it thinks it has become a victor over God himself. And in its terrible autonomy, it sees the will of God has been destroyed. Now, all these are ego ideas. All these are egoic ideas. It dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in its dreams, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. So, as you can see the language here in the description of what ego is, and I remember my first um, view that the world teaches of ego, or even in religion, they say that ego means ego means edging God out, meaning God, you're out of here, the ego. And then, so if God is out of here, then there's a new boss in town, a new sheriff. And this new boss is an idea of separation that is steeped in fear, sin consciousness, and guilt. That's an egoic idea. And when we take on those, that fear, that guilt, that separation, I mean, it just opens the door for us to imagine ourselves being so uh, separated, so prodigal. We've left like we left home. We left our mama and our daddy. We left our father. That's what the whole story of the prodigal son is about. He wanted to get away from pops because he thought there was something grander and greater outside of the love that he was experiencing. But in that story, the father never did hesitate from allowing the son to go because the father knew that there was nothing outside of him. He knew he'd be back because he really knew that there was nothing else outside. There's nothing outside of the reality. There's nothing outside of the truth. There's nothing outside of that which is unalterable, that which is changeless, that which is light. But we can have a what you call a prodigal experience. We can walk out into the meaningless and the nothingness and try to find happiness and joy and peace and significance. But eventually that runs its course. And we finally turn to rediscover who we are and whose we are, and that we were only on a illusional journey without a distance. It's impossible to separate from God. It would be like the sun separating from itself or the moon separating from itself. It's impossible. It would be like wet separating from water. It's impossible. It's impossible to separate from our creator. It can't happen. And the body gives the appearance that we're separate because we're in these individuated bodies, but that's not who we are. That's just our license to be here. That's just what is needed to get into this dimension. You need a physical body. But body identification is not your essential self. Your essential self is infinite. Your essential self is whole, complete, innocent. Your essential self is pure awareness, pure presence, pure oneness, joined with everything and everyone. And the ego is also goes on to, build this case up by saying that the Son of God is, uh, uh, well, actually, here in the third paragraph, it kind of switches on us. And now God's talking. Ego talked for the first two paragraphs. Now God's talking. And God said, the Son of God is egoless. He is egoless without ego. He's the Son of God is not separated. He has no belief in it. He knows it's not even, he knows it's an insane idea. When you come to discover who you really are, you know it's an insane idea to think that you could actually get away from God. It's impossible. You've never been apart. You will never be apart. We get so caught up in the activities, the events, the sensations, the perceptions of this world. We get so caught up in that which comes and goes. We get so caught up in it that we lose sight of our essential self. But it's there, it never goes anywhere. It is the thing that always been and will always be. Even from a child, when you first arrived on the scene, your essential self arrived on the scene, not the body. but a projection that there's a body called Oliver and a body called Eldred and a body called Hazel and a body called, Sean, but that's not who we are. So, truth is speaking now. It says the Son of God is egoless. What can he know of madness and the death of God when he abides in him? What can he know of sorrow and of suffering? That which is unalterable, that which is unchanging, that which is truth, who you are. It cannot suffer, it cannot sorrow, it cannot, it cannot know madness nor death. It says, what can he know of sorrow and suffering when he lives in eternal joy? Your essential self is joy, happiness, and peace. What can he know of fear and punishment, of sin and guilt, of hatred and attack, when all there is surrounding him is everlasting peace, forever conflict free and undisturbed? Your essential self is conflict free and undisturbed. Your undisturbed self in deepest silence and tranquility. So, as we find ourselves in this dimension, seemingly expressing ourselves through a bodily expression, but we're not the body. But we're allowed to use the body to express who we really are. But when we lose sight and become so enamored with the body and taken away by it to where we lose sight of our true essential self, we enter into the land of suffering and punishment and fear and guilt and hatred and attack and sorrow. Yes, when we experience suffering, that's the reason we experience it, because we believe that our situations and circumstances and conditions are our reality. We believe that name Oliver is our reality. Our social security number is our reality. And we get carried away and we don't realize it's almost like the actor. My name's Oliver. I'm Oliver Blue. I'm the real Oliver Blue. But then I take an acting job and I play this role. Say Oliver Blue plays the role of Jeff. And so when Oliver goes on the stage to play the role of Jeff, you remember Oliver and Jeff is it's not two different people, it's the same one. But see, Oliver can get so caught up into the role of Jeff that he lose his awareness of his true self, which is Oliver. And that's kind of how it happens. We lose sight of our essential self and we somehow begin to think that we're actually this actor, this ego, this separated self. It says, to know reality is not to see the ego and its thoughts, its works, its acts, its laws, and its beliefs, its dreams, its hopes, its plans for its salvation, and the cost belief in it entails. In suffering, the price for faith in it is so immense that crucifixion of the Son of God is offered daily at its darkened shrine, and blood must flow from the altar, which it stickly or sickly follows, for where its sickly followers prepare to die. That's where the ego will lead you, to its shrine of sickness and death and hopelessness and guilt and fear and shame and disgust. And it's only a meaningless idea. It's not even real. But we attempt to make that which is unreal real. That's why we have to change our minds about the way we think and the way we see. It robs us of all of our joy, all of our peace, all of our happiness. Yet will one lily of forgiveness change the darkness into light. One lily of forgiveness. What is forgiveness? It's a shift in perception. Forgiveness is when we come to a realization that we were bowing down at the shrine of the ego's lies of separation, of the ego lies that we are guilty, that we are, you know, punishable by death. And it even created this whole idea about eternal death. Now think about it now. Even a natural father wouldn't sentence his own son to eternal death. How can love itself do that? It's impossible. It's impossible. But we have perpetrated that idea and have been very responsible for the demise of our own human race. But that is changing because we're changing our mind. We're changing our mind. We're not buying into the story anymore. It says, yet with one lily of forgiveness change the darkness into light, the altar of illusions to the shrine of life itself. And peace will be restored forever to the holy minds that God created as his son. God created all humanity as an extension of him, and he calls them son. It's really, in reality, it's an extension of himself. That's why there's no separation. It would be like you trying to separate your physical self from your physical self. That's impossible. Let alone trying to separate your essential self from yourself. It's impossible. His dwelling place, his joy, his love, he is completely one with him. So I thought it was really important for me to establish what the course description of what the ego is. And basically, as we get into this, you'll find out that it's just a thought system. The ego has a thought system. It has a mind. It basically it mimics truth. It mimics God. So it's got a mind. It's got a thought system. You know, it's got followers. You know, but it's all just an idea. It's not even a real entity. It's just a tiny mad idea that God separated from himself. And it's impossible. Impossible. You are as God created you. So if we turn on back over to page 21, lesson 13, the lesson now make a whole lot of sense to you. And it starts out by the idea for today is a meaningless world engenders fear. Remember, our previous message was I am upset because I see a meaningless world. So if I see a meaningless world, that because I see a meaningless world, it engenders fear, meaning it causes fear, it develops fear, it brings into being a sense of fear, it brings forth fear, and it brings about an idea of fear. The fact that I see a meaningless world, that engenders fear. Why? Because it leaves this void. What is it for? It has to mean something, and so we rush to what? Give it meaning. We rush to give it meaning. How can I be in a meaningless world? Does that mean I'm meaningless? So it engenders fear. So we don't want to be meaningless. So we have to find something, some value to give to the world, so that it releases us from the meaningless. So it says today's idea is really another form of the preceding one, except that it is more specific as to the emotion aroused. Fear is an emotion. A meaningless world arouses the emotion of fear. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible. So we're being aroused by the idea of a meaningless world, and it engenders fear. But just like separation is impossible, a meaningless world is impossible. Nothing without meaning exists. If it has no meaning, it does not exist. It's not real. Remember, we talked about the summary of the Course of Miracles. That which is real cannot be threatened, meaning can't be altered, can't be changed, can't be undone, can't be broken into many pieces, can't be separated. That which is unreal does not exist. If it's not real, it doesn't exist. Therein lies the peace of God. So here, what it's saying is nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not think you perceive something that has no meaning. Remember, we see only the past. Our mind is preoccupied with the past. That's meaningless because it doesn't exist. Or the anticipation for the future. That's meaningless because the future doesn't exist. The only thing that exists, the only thing that is real is this present moment. Listen to me. This present moment that you and I are engaging in this workbook lesson is the only moment there is. Each and every moment is the only moment that is. Therefore, that's reality. Therefore, when we engage in thinking and perceiving or seeing based on the past or an anticipated future, we're participating in that which does not exist. That's why it brings on the emotion of fear, because it's meaningless. You getting this? It says, on the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think you do perceive it. Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, I see. I do perceive it. Recognition of meaninglessness, to recognize meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety. Anxiety is one of the biggest experience of all humanity. This feeling of uneasiness, this feeling of worry, this feeling of vulnerability. This is all traits of anxiety. Fear of the future, afraid that, you know, the past is present, and it engenders fear. Intense anxiety when we recognize things as meaningless. It says it arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. Well, who are the separated ones? There are really no separated ones. But who are the separated ones? Those of us that continue to think and believe that separation is a reality. You're not the separated one. There are no separated ones, but the ones that believe that they are separated. They're having the experience of the separated ones, but they haven't changed anything. You haven't altered anything. Your essential self is still intact. My essential self is still intact. When I get into fear, now I know it's an indication that I have at some point chose wrongly. I have at some point thought wrongly, saw wrongly, and rejected love. Because there is no fear in love. In fact, the traditional scripture said that perfect love casteth out all fear. What is perfect love? It is the knowing of yourself as love itself. It is the knowing of yourself as complete innocent and whole. It's the knowing of yourself as complete joy and happiness. It's the knowing of yourself as being undivided. It's the knowing of yourself as being one with the only one that exists. Yes, that's you. That's me. That's all humanity, no exception. That's the truth about all of us. It's never changed. It has never changed. I don't care how many stories, how much history have tried to separate humanity from its father and divide us in billions of pieces. Wars, uprising, downfalls. People have tried to exterminate whole races of people and countries and oppress people, and all that was the ego trying to prove that separation is real. It won't happen. Don't matter how terrible the movie gets, how insane it has gotten over these 6,000, 10,000, how many ever years we've inhabited this planet. And the movie has gotten really gaudy at times. I mean, absolutely just extreme. But in all that extreme, it has not changed one thing. Love is still all there is. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other Okay. See the idea where there's an enemy? That's where the idea of an enemy comes. And how many people do that are so highly developed in this idea of an enemy, the enemy? Well, the lessons here going to bear out the reality of this idea of an enemy against God. I mean, in traditional religious community, they call it devils and demons. The course doesn't go there. It basically recognizes in reality it's just an egoic idea that there's an enemy that is at war against God. It doesn't even that doesn't even compute when you embrace that which is real. How preposterous. It would be like you were 4 month old somehow is able to write you a note and say, "Hey, I'm at war against you and I'm going to defeat you." You're 4 year old. I mean, you're 4 month old. That's not possible. He said he defeat you. Okay, where did that idea come from? That's the question the ego would ask you. Wow, I'm loving this. I hope you are. It says it represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning it is being written in the empty space of meaninglessness that meaninglessness provides. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own idea there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. And on this alone, it is correct. Remember, I said earlier that the ego always speaks first and it speaks loudest. Why? Because it fears that the truth will be heard and embraced. And anytime we hear the truth and embrace the truth, that which is unreal does not exist. And it's all of its ideas goes right into that space of nothingness. When you hear the truth, when I hear the truth, the real truth and nothing but the truth about our identity, about who we really are, about the essential self that we are, our eternal self, our changeless self. When we hear that and finally embrace it, we cannot embrace it. You'll know you embraced it when you let go of the idea of separation. Can't hold both. You'll know that you have embraced it when that peace which passes understanding is what you begin to experience. Because you know that you are the peace, you are the happiness, you are the love. Yes. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. We don't have to fear the meaningless. We don't have to fear the meaningless. The idea of separation is meaningless and we don't have to fear it. Why? It doesn't exist. It's not real. No such thing as meaningless. But when we allow the egoic idea of separation to rush in and claim what we believe to be meaningless, then we arouse fear and anxiety. Are you getting this? I'm getting this. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess. We'll begin to curse everything and call it sin and call it cursed and call it bad and call a group different, and we'll sentence people to eternal damnation. We'll do all kind of insane stuff and say all kind and believe all kind of insane stuff and perpetuate it year after year, century after century, decade after decade. And we see those dead bodies and we look at it and we say, where is God? And God doesn't have anything to do with that because it's not real. It is not real. You are real. And you've seen it all. You were there. You've been there from the very beginning, which there is no beginning. You've been with the Father from the very beginning. Always was, and you always will be. And this drama that plays out on the stage of this, of what we call life or this planet, can we look on the devastation and believe it not? That's what it's going to take. Can you look on the devastation and believe it not? That's what it's going to take. When you go to a movie, so you go to the movie theater, when you go walk in, you see that big old screen. And that screen is always there. It never changes. It never moves. It never fluctuates. It's just there in stillness and quietness. And regardless of what's projected upon it, it never changes. It never alters. It's just there. You ever notice when you walk out the theater and the last reel has run through, that big old black screen is still there, unaffected by all that killing or all that romance or all that whatever was in the movie. Regardless of what was projected upon the screen was unaffected by it. In fact, the movie could not have happened without the screen. So liken yourself to that screen. You're always present. And all the comings and goings of life plays out on your screen, your essential self. You allow all the activities, all the events, all the perceptions, all the relationships, everything that happens in this life. It happens on the screen of your reality, which is consciousness. And it couldn't happen without you. So it's not happening to you, it's happening because of you. You provide the energy, you provide the um, the love, you provide the you provide the creativity, but most of all, you provide the reality and what is projected upon your consciousness, the screen of your life As birth and death, it's just a play. It's not real. It's an experience. And we're not our experiences. We just have experiences. We're not our experiences. We come here and we have experiences. And then we get caught up in the experiences thinking that we are the experience. No, you're not the experience. If you think you are the experience, then you're going to engender fear. If you think you are the experience, then you're going to experience intense anxiety because your natural habitat. It would be like trying to trying to take and shove the big screen in the movie theater. Try to take it and shove it through the projector. because the big screen now thinking that it's in reality it is the movie that was playing on it on its consciousness. Insane, right? It's late in the morning. It's early in the morning. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be for you who equate yourself with the ego. Safety devices. The exercises for today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times for not more than a minute or so at each at each time, are to be practiced in a somewhat different way from the preceding ones. With eyes closed, repeat today's idea to yourself. A meaningless world engenders fear. Then open your eyes and look around you slowly, saying, I am looking at a meaningless world. I am looking at a meaningless world. Repeat this statement to yourself as you look about. Then close your eyes and conclude, make the conclusion with this statement. A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. That's why it engenders fear. Because we've taken on the belief system or the idea of being separated. And so we've taken on the idea of an ego self. We've exchanged our essential self for an ego self. The screen, the big black screen, stable screen in the movie theater has ceased in its mind to be the big screen, the unchangeable screen, and said that no, I am the activities in the movies that play upon my screen. Go figure that. See how impossible that is? And so when we think like that, then we think we're competing with the truth. And when we think we're competing with the truth, how can you avoid anxiety and fear and sin consciousness and guilt? We are trying to alter the unalterable. We're trying to take the light and put it out. We're trying to take the truth and make it a lie. And it's impossible. You may find this, you may find, you may find it difficult to avoid resistance in one form or another to this concluding statement that you think that you are in competition with God. You may not accept that initially. You will resist that idea, and that's okay. It tells you in the next sentence, whatever form such resistance may take, remind yourself that you are really afraid of such a thought because the vengeance of the enemy, because of the vengeance of the enemy. You are not expected to believe the statement at this point and will probably dismiss it as preposterous. I'm not think I'm competing with God. Note carefully, however, that any signs of overt or covert fear which it may arouse, the whole idea. This is our attempt at stating an explicit cause and effect relationship. What's the cause? I see a meaningless world. What's the cause? I believe in separation. Therefore, I have to apply meaning to this world. Otherwise, if I don't apply meaning to this world, God might. And so the ego rushes in, speaks loud, speaks first, and gives it meanings: separation, death, despair. And it arouses fear and anxiety in us because we think it's real. And now we think we opposing the truth. But the truth is God is light, and in him there is no darkness. Truth says um, God is love. And if you even believe that, think that separation could have happened, he said, okay, I'll come where you are. And he said, well, okay, well, I've just reconciled everything back to myself. So I put it back together. Broke me apart, but I put us back together. Now what? You gonna do it again? Oh, thank you. Note carefully, however, any signs of overt or covert fear, which it may arouse, and not may arouse, it will arouse. This is our first attempt at stating the explicit cause and effect relationship of a kind which you are very inexperienced in recognizing. As we start this reversal, renewal, rejuvenation process of learning how to undo our way of thinking based on separation, sin, guilt, and fear. As we at the beginning, we're just on lesson 14. We got 340 some more lessons to go through. So we're just at the beginning of this process. We're tearing down the walls of meaninglessness and nothingness. So we're just at the beginning of this process. And I feel a shift in me already. I don't know about you, but I'm shifting in my thinking. I'm shifting in my seeing based on these ideas. And I'm feeling such a peace of confidence. I'm feeling such a certainty about my used. I'm not confused about who I am. I remind myself of Jesus because he embraced Jesus wrote this course that we're taking. That's an idea that you might resist, but I'm convinced of it, because it's in the doing of the exercises that prove them true. That's why I say do the exercises Even if you got resistance, even if you don't believe it, just keep doing the exercise. Eventually, you will come to the conclusion, like it says, the recognition that this is true. How will you know? Because your spirit bears witness that you see the I am that you are. But right now we're inexperienced because we just 14 days in. Okay, we're not expert, we're not pros, we're not, we're just trying to do the lessons every day. And if you're not doing the lessons every day, it's okay. If you're not doing them correctly, it's okay. Or if you're not, doing if it says do it 4 times and you only do it 2 times, it's okay. Don't be hard on yourself. It's not about doing them correctly, but doing them. It's not about doing them perfectly. Okay. But the more you engage in these workbook lessons, the more, you're going to see the veil unfold, and all that's going to be left is the sun shining brightly from glory to glory to glory to glory to glory. That's what it means, from glory to glory. From glory to glory. We're going from glory to glory, okay? Each day as we do a lesson, that's another level of glory, another level of awareness, from glory to glory. Traditional scripture said that we go from glory to glory. This is what he's talking about. To go from glory to glory is talking about you coming into an awareness of the truth of who you are, your essential self, your guiltless, sinless, innocent self. Do you feel any resistance when I say that? That's the ego racing in to speak loud and first. That can't be. That little skinny boy don't know what he's talking about. Well, it's not me. I'm just going through the workbook lesson. It says, do not dwell on the concluding statement. So don't dwell on it, and try not even to think of it except during the practice period. That will suffice for now. And for now, that has to suffice. I've been on here so much longer than almost 1 hour. And it just feels like 15 minutes. But I wanted to go in depth on this lesson because it's the beginning of the introduction of ideas that are going to be so life-changing when you embrace them. When you embrace the reality of your oneness with God in all creation. There is no separation. Think about that. If there is no separation, if there's never been any separation, what in the world have we been doing? Just think about that. I thought about that 15 years ago. I've been studying this for 15 years. And when I first got introduced to the idea that the separation never occurred, that's an egoic idea, a tiny mad idea. It's impossible. But it said that this whole world was built on that belief. And all religions were built on that belief. But there was a time that we believed that the world was flat. But one day it was discovered that what? It was round, and people embraced it and accepted it. There's a time in my life when I thought I was a separate individual, egoic, body identifying self. separated from God, sinful, going to, possibly going to hell or whatever, and, not acceptable, unworthy, all the things that we say about humanity, unworthy with God, filthy rags, all of the stuff that we created ourselves and put it on the Father. We've made of God an unworthy Father, one that has an anger management problem, and was sent as his only son, his only creation. He sent himself to hell if we embrace the story. It's almost like out of a Steven Spielberg movie. None of it's real. It's not real. It don't hold up on the water. It don't hold up. Love is not, Humpty Dumpty did not fall and break into 1,000 pieces. You know how it goes. All the king horses, all king men couldn't put God back together again. That's what it's saying. That's an ego message. That God is broken into billions of pieces and can't be put back together. And every time we put a body in the ground, we put God in the ground. But it has no life. Where did the life go? Let me stop. I act like I'm having fun, and I'm acting like I don't have anything else to do today. Thank you so much for joining us for lesson 13. It's been fun. I love you so much. Come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. Namaste. Complete your lessons. I love you so much. Bye-bye.